Have you ever wondered what it would be like if Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, returned to the palace in complete secrecy? Imagine this. The world outside sleeps unaware. The cameras are silent, the guards dutifully pacing their usual beats, and yet, somewhere in the shadows, a figure slips past the usual protocols. That figure is Harry. And at this very moment, his return is poised to send shockwaves across the royal family, across the tabloids, and across every living room where people follow the drama of royalty like a high-stakes thriller. But what makes this moment even more explosive is not just that he returned. It's that Meghan Markle, his wife, is furious, and no one knows how she will respond. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let's start at the beginning. Harry has been away from the palace for years now. He moved to the United States, leaving behind the life he was born into, carving a new path, attempting to create a space for himself and Meghan outside the rigid walls of royalty. But nostalgia is a powerful thing. Memory has its claws, and no matter how far you travel, some ties cannot be fully severed. So why, on this night, did Harry decide to make this clandestine visit? What drove him to risk the fallout, the scrutiny, and the wrath of both the palace and the press? Some say it's personal, some say it's political. But what is undeniable is that this is no ordinary trip. This is a journey fraught with tension, secrecy, and the kind of drama that could only unfold behind the gilded walls of one of the world's most famous palaces. Picture it. The palace is quiet. Chandeliers shimmer in the night. The halls echo with memories, with the footsteps of generations past. And then, quietly, a figure emerges from the shadows. His face is familiar, yet his presence is unannounced. Every eye in the media would leap at the sight of him. But tonight, there are no cameras, just the thrill of the forbidden, the weight of the past, and the anticipation of confrontation. Why would Harry come back? Could it be that he received information he could not ignore? Perhaps there's something hidden, a secret correspondence, a long-lost document, or even whispers of a family dispute that demanded his immediate attention. Royals are used to secrecy, but secrets have a way of leaking. And in this case, the secret of Harry's return is about to explode in the most dramatic way possible. Now, think about Meghan. Her reaction is a story in itself. Meghan is not one to sit quietly when she perceives a betrayal or a breach of trust. Imagine the tension building across the Atlantic as messages are exchanged, calls are made, and fury brews. What did she know? How did she find out? And how did her anger shape the evening that was already teetering on the edge of chaos? This is not speculation. It's the emotional truth at the core of this story. Because when two strong personalities clash, and when the stakes are as high as they are in the royal sphere, the consequences ripple far beyond personal relationships. They reach the public, the press, and even history itself. As Harry navigates the palace corridors, each step is deliberate, measured, calculated. The guards, trained to notice the slightest anomaly, move around him with oblivious precision. He knows the cameras are everywhere, yet he trusts his timing, his knowledge of the palace layout, and perhaps the complicity of those who want him to succeed. But even the most meticulous plan cannot account for emotion. The sudden jolt of recognition in a familiar face, the slip of a foot on a polished marble floor, the unexpected sound of a door creaking. Every second is a story, and every choice could ignite a scandal that no one could have predicted. And then, the moment comes. The moment when Harry sees something, or someone, that makes him stop cold. Perhaps it's a photograph, a letter, or even a person he thought he would never see again. The weight of the moment presses down on him. Heart racing, adrenaline surging, he realizes that this visit is no longer just a simple return. It's a confrontation. It's a reckoning. And in that instant, he understands that nothing will ever be the same again. The palace, in all its grandeur and history, becomes a stage for a drama that is deeply personal, yet inevitably public. Have you ever been in a situation where one decision could unravel years of carefully constructed life? Where a single choice could ignite tempers, shatter alliances, and create ripples that extend far beyond your control. That is exactly the tension Harry faces now. And the question you, as the audience, must ask yourself is this. If you were in his shoes, would you risk it? Would you step back into a world that you left behind, knowing the potential fallout? knowing the personal and public stakes? And yet, despite the risk, Harry moves forward. Each step echoes with a mix of courage and recklessness. The palace, silent and grand, seems almost alive with anticipation. Somewhere, Meghan's fury simmers like a storm on the horizon, threatening to break at any moment. And the palace staff, accustomed to discretion and loyalty, find themselves caught in a tension that could not have been predicted. Who will side with him? Who will intervene? And who will simply watch, knowing that the outcome could change everything? It is at this point, as Harry reaches the heart of the palace, that the true drama begins. A letter, a message, or perhaps even a photograph awaits him, something that he did not expect, something that challenges everything he thought he knew. The revelation is immediate, shocking, and profoundly personal. It is a twist that will redefine not only the evening, but the very relationships he has left behind. And as he processes this, we see the stakes rise. Not just for Harry, not just for Meghan, but for the entire royal family. Every glance, every word, every choice becomes a potential trigger for scandal, for betrayal, for heartbreak. And what about Meghan? What is her next move? Her fury is not just a reaction, it is a force of nature. It is the embodiment of every slight, every perceived betrayal, and every fear that has built up over years of public scrutiny. Will she confront him directly? Will she take action behind the scenes? Or will she manipulate events in ways only she can, orchestrating outcomes that no one expects? The tension is palpable, almost unbearable, and it is precisely this tension that drives the story forward. Now, let me ask you directly, can you feel it? The weight of history, the intensity of personal emotion, the anticipation of revelation? This is not just a story about royalty. It is a story about family, power, loyalty, betrayal, and the human heart caught in a web of circumstance and expectation. It is about choices that cannot be undone, about moments that will define lives, and about secrets that cannot remain hidden forever. But here's the kicker, the cliffhanger that sets the stage for everything that follows. Harry's secret return is only the beginning. What he discovers inside the palace, and what Meghan's response will trigger, is something so explosive, so unexpected, that it will redefine everything you thought you knew about this family. And it all starts now. The palace doors are closed behind him, the shadows lengthen, and the drama that has been building for years finally erupts. But what comes next will change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever wondered what drives someone to risk everything for a single, secret decision? For Prince Harry, that question had become a reality tonight. He wasn't just stepping out of his home in California or leaving the comfort of his private life. He was crossing oceans, crossing boundaries, and stepping back into a world he had tried so hard to leave behind. Every movement was calculated, every choice loaded with consequence. But the question on his mind was simple. Could he do it? Could he walk through the palace doors without setting off a storm that might engulf him, Meghan, and the entire royal family? The first step was planning. Harry knew that discretion was paramount. No press, no leaks, no chance encounters. His team, small, trusted, loyal, was briefed to the smallest detail. Every taxi route, every security checkpoint, every potential angle the media might exploit had been mapped, measured, rehearsed. He even considered the timing of his flight, ensuring it arrived when the palace was at its quietest, when the staff was in predictable patterns, and when the cameras were likely least vigilant. It wasn't just about sneaking in. It was about minimizing risk, controlling variables, and avoiding embarrassment, or worse, confrontation. But as meticulous as the planning was, it couldn't account for the human element. Guards could notice, staff could slip information, and Meghan. Well, Meghan was unpredictable. Even the thought of her discovering the plan sent a twinge of anxiety through him. He knew her temperament well enough to know that any misstep would not be met with calm reasoning, but with righteous fury. And yet, he pressed on. The stakes were too high to turn back. Every mission has a moment when hesitation becomes impossible. For Harry, it was stepping out of the private jet onto British soil. The night air hit him sharply, carrying with it the scent of the palace grounds, the distant hum of traffic, and the unmistakable weight of history. It was intoxicating. His pulse quickened. Memories of childhood visits, of family events, of moments long buried in his mind, surged forward. Yet, nostalgia was dangerous. It could slow him down, make him visible, make him human in a situation where caution was survival. He moved with the precision of someone trained to be in the public eye, but acting now in secrecy. Each step toward the palace was deliberate. His eyes scanned the perimeter, noting shadows that could be innocuous or revealing. Every bush, every tree, every statue seemed alive with potential witnesses. The air was thick with tension. For anyone else, the risk would have been unimaginable. For Harry, it was a calculated gamble, a delicate dance between exposure and invisibility. And yet, even as he approached the palace, he felt the tug of doubt. Am I doing the right thing? He asked himself. Will this bring clarity or only chaos? Doubt is a powerful companion. It gnaws at your confidence, makes the shadows darker, the corridors longer, the risk more palpable. But there is also courage in doubt, the courage to move forward despite uncertainty, the courage to act when hesitation could mean missing the opportunity entirely. Harry chose courage. Inside, the palace was silent but not lifeless. Every corridor carried echoes of the past. The walls whispered stories of monarchs, scandals, victories, and betrayals. He imagined the ghosts of history watching, measuring his audacity, questioning his intent. And in that moment, the enormity of what he was doing hit him fully. He was stepping into a world of power and protocol that he had long left behind. And in doing so, he risked the scrutiny not just of his family, but of the entire world. The mission was more than a return. It was a confrontation with his own past. Every decision he had made since leaving the palace, every step toward independence and autonomy, suddenly collided with the weight of royal expectation. Could he reconcile the man he had become with the world he had left behind? And more importantly, could he face Meghan's reaction, knowing full well that she would not approve, and might even see the act itself as a betrayal? Security was the next challenge. Guards are trained to notice the unusual, to detect breaches, and to respond quickly and decisively. Harry had accounted for patterns, timings, and rotations, but human behavior is never fully predictable. One misstep, one wrong glance, one unexpected interruption could unravel everything. And yet, he had confidence. He had practiced, visualized, and rehearsed this moment countless times. Confidence, after all, is not the absence of fear, it is action despite fear. Then came the first real test. Approaching the main gates, Harry slowed his pace, blending with shadows, his body tense, senses heightened. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, a distant car engine, the subtle click of a guard's boot on marble, seemed amplified. He imagined himself as both observer and participant, moving unseen, yet acutely aware of the world he was re-entering. It was thrilling, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. His mind drifted briefly to Meghan. What would she think if she knew he was here? Would she be angry, hurt, betrayed? Or would she understand the necessity of his presence? Harry couldn't predict her reaction, and that uncertainty added weight to every step. It was one thing to sneak past guards and cameras, but it was quite another to face the emotional consequences of his choices. Every relationship carries risk, but some risks are unavoidable. The gates were behind him, the palace walls looming ahead. And then, a sudden, unexpected challenge. A guard, turning a corner earlier than anticipated. Harry froze, instinctively blending into the shadows. Heart pounding, he held his breath as the guard passed mere feet from him, oblivious to the figure in plain sight. The moment lasted an eternity, each second a battle of control versus exposure. And when the guard finally moved out of view, Harry allowed himself a silent exhale, but not relief. The mission had only just begun. Inside the palace, the corridors stretched ahead like a maze. Chandeliers cast fractured light across polished floors, shadows dancing like phantoms. Every painting seemed to watch him, every doorway a potential obstacle. He moved with caution, using the layout of his past familiarity to his advantage. Yet, familiarity can be deceptive. Years away had changed everything. New security measures, rearranged furniture, unknown staff routines. Every corner held uncertainty. Every step was an act of bravery. And then, he reached a moment of pause. A door slightly ajar, the faint glow of light spilling into the corridor. Someone awaited him behind it. Perhaps it was a message, a person, or a revelation he had not anticipated. Harry's instincts screamed caution, yet curiosity demanded he proceed. After all, this was the very reason he had come, to uncover truths that had been hidden, to confront realities long deferred. But what Harry did not anticipate was the emotional intensity of what awaited him. Every sense was heightened. The scent of polished wood, the distant hum of activity, the faint sound of a voice he thought he would never hear again. And with each step closer, the stakes grew higher, the tension thicker. The palace, once a place of childhood innocence, had transformed into a theater of suspense, a labyrinth where every choice could ignite scandal, heartbreak, or revelation. As he reached the threshold, he paused, one hand on the doorframe, heart hammering, mind racing. The consequences of his next action would ripple far beyond the walls of the palace. Could he face the fallout? Could he endure the confrontation, the anger, the exposure? There was only one way to find out. With a deep breath, he stepped forward into the unknown. And just as he did, a sound stopped him cold. A whisper, a footstep, something unexpected. Someone else was there. Someone who shouldn't have been. The tension snapped tighter than a drawn bow, and Harry realized that the simple act of entering the palace had already triggered a chain of events he could not control. The mission was no longer just a visit. It was a collision of past and present, secrecy and exposure, love and fury. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The palace at night is a different world entirely. Gone are the tourists, the flashing cameras, the endless chatter of guided tours. The grandeur remains, the marble floors, the sweeping staircases, the gilded chandeliers. But it has transformed into something darker, more enigmatic, almost alive with secrets. Shadows stretch across walls like silent sentinels, flickering in the light of carefully placed lamps. For Prince Harry, this nocturnal palace was both familiar and alien. He had walked these halls countless times, but tonight, every creak of the floor, every distant hum of a hidden ventilation system, carried the weight of suspense. Imagine this. You are moving through a labyrinth of history, every painting on the walls staring down like a witness. The portraits of kings and queens, dukes and duchesses, seem almost judgmental in their silence. They don't speak, but their presence is heavy, as though centuries of protocol and expectation are pressing down on your shoulders. Harry could feel it, the pressure of legacy, the weight of choices he had made, and the burden of the secrets he had carried since leaving the palace years ago. Each step he took was measured, deliberate, a tightrope between boldness and recklessness. The palace corridors at night are not just empty, they are alive with the echoes of the past. Faint whispers, the distant laughter of former guests, the subtle creak of doors opening long ago. It is impossible not to feel watched. For Harry, the corridors were a memory lane, each hallway triggering recollections of childhood curiosity and teenage rebellion. But tonight, nostalgia was secondary to caution. Every footfall, every shadow, every reflection in the polished marble floors could reveal him. Harry's first priority was navigation. The palace, with its intricate layout, can be disorienting, especially when moving in stealth mode. Corridors twist and turn unexpectedly, staircases appear where none existed before, and secret doors that are rarely used suddenly become critical paths of movement. He relied on memory, intuition, and a mental map built over decades of familiarity. But memory can play tricks. Hallways looked different in the moonlight. Doors seemed closer or farther apart than he remembered. Even the pattern of shadows could mislead a person into a wrong turn. Then there was the atmosphere. The silence is almost suffocating, broken only by the occasional whisper of a draft through an open window or the distant echo of a guard's footsteps in another wing. It is the kind of silence that makes every heartbeat deafening, every breath noticeable. Harry felt it in his chest, a tightness, a tension that sharpened his senses. He had to move carefully, but quickly. The longer he lingered, the higher the chance of being seen. The palace, majestic as it is, becomes a maze of suspense at night, and the slightest miscalculation could expose him instantly. Harry paused near the grand staircase, his hand brushing lightly over the carved banister, familiar under his fingertips but infused with a strange new weight. For a brief moment, his mind drifted to Meghan. What would she think of this daring endeavor? Would she scold him, warn him, or simply shake her head in exasperation? He could imagine her words, sharp and precise, carrying both frustration and concern. "Harry, what are you thinking? This isn't just reckless, it's dangerous." And yet, that imagined rebuke fueled him. The risk was personal, but it was also necessary. He needed answers, clarity, or at least confrontation with the truths that had been buried too long. And just as he stepped forward, determined to follow the clues, a sound froze him mid-motion. The unmistakable click of a door opening, soft yet deliberate. Someone else was in the corridor. Someone who shouldn't be. The shadows seemed to deepen, the air to thicken, and Harry knew instantly that the next encounter would be pivotal. The palace had shifted from quiet mystery to active suspense. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. There are few things in the world more terrifying than the fury of someone who feels betrayed. And for Meghan Markle, that fury was about to ignite in a way that would shake not just her immediate family, but the palace, the press, and the global public alike. She had always been deliberate, measured, and strategic. But tonight, she was not measured. Tonight, she was furious. And Harry, despite all his careful planning and secrecy, was about to feel the full force of it. The first sign that something was wrong came through a subtle message, a text, a call, or perhaps even a carefully planted whisper through one of their mutual contacts. Meghan had found out. She knew Harry was making this secret journey back to the palace, and she did not approve. Not in the slightest. Her reaction, though unseen at first, was immediate and intense. Her fury wasn't just about the risk, it was about what his action represented. A unilateral decision, a break from their partnership, a reminder that some aspects of the past could never truly be left behind. Imagine it. Across the Atlantic, Meghan's world had shifted in an instant. The tension coiled within her like a tightly wound spring, each second amplifying her anger. She paced through the rooms of their home, her mind racing through every possible outcome. How could Harry do this without consulting her? Did he not understand the stakes? The implications? The potential for humiliation, for scandal, for damage to their carefully constructed life in America? Fury, for Meghan, was never quiet. It was sharp, cutting, and exacting. And it demanded action. She remembered every moment that had led to this. The subtle betrayals, the misunderstandings, the choices made in isolation. Each one built a mental picture of Harry as someone who sometimes acted impulsively, driven by instinct rather than strategy. And now, this clandestine palace mission, was the culmination of all those impulses. It was reckless. It was daring. And, in Meghan's mind, it was potentially catastrophic. She had warned him before, subtly and overtly, about the consequences of acting alone. And now, those warnings had been ignored. Anger is not always loud. Sometimes it is a cold, simmering intensity that radiates through every action and every word. Meghan's fury manifested in precise, calculated ways. Her phone buzzed incessantly with updates from contacts, advisors, and perhaps even palace insiders. Every piece of information she gathered painted a clearer picture of Harry's movements, of the path he had taken, of the risks he was courting. And the more she knew, the more furious she became. Fury, after all, is amplified by knowledge. Ignorance can temper anger. Understanding can magnify it. She spoke to no one in the room, yet her voice echoed through the halls, sharp and cutting as she rehearsed what she might say if she confronted him. "How could you do this without me?" she imagined saying, her tone a mixture of incredulity and righteous indignation. "Do you not realize the consequences? The humiliation? The danger?" And in her mind, the response she anticipated from Harry, hesitation, perhaps a weak justification, only fueled her anger further. Meanwhile, Harry continued his journey through the palace, unaware that Meghan's fury was mounting with every passing minute. The distance between them, both physical and emotional, had never felt more pronounced. He was navigating corridors filled with shadows and memories, while she was navigating emotions equally labyrinthine, each thought spiraling into the next, building tension, outrage, and anticipation. The juxtaposition was stark. One in the palace, one across the ocean, yet both caught in the same storm of consequence. Meghan's fury was not just about control, it was about protection. She understood the media, the scrutiny, and the ways in which a single misstep could be magnified into a global scandal. Harry's actions, though perhaps well-intentioned, were reckless in her eyes. They threatened not just his safety, but her own peace of mind, their family's stability, and the delicate balance of public perception they had worked tirelessly to maintain. Anger, in her case, was intertwined with fear, and fear has a way of sharpening every edge, making every word and thought more acute. Her mind raced through scenarios. If Harry were caught, how would it play out? What if the palace guards noticed something unusual? What if someone leaked the news to the press? What if it reached the tabloids before either of them had a chance to control the narrative? The questions were endless, each one increasing her agitation, each one a spark feeding the flames of her fury. And yet, even in her anger, there was a methodical calculation. Meghan was not a person who acted without thought. Her fury was a force of precision. She drafted mental plans, possible confrontations, potential public statements, and even contingencies for every possible outcome. Fury, in her hands, became strategy. Every heartbeat, every sharp breath, every tensed muscle was part of a plan that would ensure she remained in control, even when Harry had seemingly acted outside of it. Meanwhile, Harry's steps through the palace corridors carried a different kind of tension. He was aware of potential threats, guards, staff, cameras, but he was unaware of the personal storm building in Meghan's mind. Every decision, every cautious move, every careful glance over the shoulder was calculated to avoid exposure to physical or public danger, but the emotional and relational consequences were invisible, yet equally potent. Meghan's fury was a silent predator, stalking across oceans, ready to strike. The palace, still bathed in moonlight, seemed to sense the tension. Shadows deepened, corridors felt narrower, and the silence became almost oppressive. Harry could feel it. The weight of history, expectation, and consequence pressing down on him. Yet he pressed on, compelled by curiosity, necessity, or perhaps defiance. Every step was a gamble, every movement a risk. And unbeknownst to him, Meghan's own storm was gathering strength, her fury sharpening with each imagined misstep, each calculated risk she knew he had taken. Then came the first real indication of her potential interference. A message arrived, brief and pointed, from someone in their mutual circle, perhaps intentionally, or perhaps inadvertently, highlighting Harry's movements. Meghan's fury was now a force that could intersect with Harry's actions, creating a collision course neither of them could fully anticipate. It was the moment where private emotion began to intersect with public consequence, where fury transformed into action, and where the potential for confrontation became inevitable. She paused, eyes narrowing, considering the next steps. Anger is often a prelude to action, and Meghan's mind was a whirlwind of potential strategies, each more precise and pointed than the last. Every option involved exerting influence, controlling perception, or forcing a confrontation that could clarify, intimidate, or even punish. Fury, in this context, was power, direct, unrelenting, and unavoidable. Harry, meanwhile, had reached a critical juncture in his mission. The palace corridors twisted ahead, leading him closer to the heart of the estate, the inner chambers, and potentially to the very secrets that had drawn him back. Every instinct screamed caution, but his curiosity, combined with necessity, propelled him forward. He could not know that Meghan's fury was already a shadow over his actions, ready to intersect in ways that could redefine their relationship, their public image, and the very course of the evening. The tension reached a peak as Harry paused at the entrance to a long, dimly lit corridor. The silence was deafening. Every polished floorboard, every distant footstep, every flicker of candlelight seemed magnified. And then, without warning, a subtle vibration from his phone, perhaps a message, perhaps a warning, reminded him that his mission was not isolated. Somewhere, across the ocean, Meghan's fury was real, immediate, and potent. It was a reminder that no amount of secrecy, planning, or stealth could fully isolate him from the consequences of his actions. And as he took a cautious step forward, the first signs of confrontation became clear. Somewhere in the palace, someone had been watching, waiting, and now, a choice would have to be made. One step, one decision, one revelation could ignite Meghan's fury in ways that would ripple far beyond this night. The emotional stakes were as high as the physical ones, and the path forward was fraught with uncertainty, danger, and revelation. The chapter ends on the cusp of collision. Harry moving deeper into the palace, unaware of the force of Meghan's fury drawing closer, ready to intersect with every careful step he takes. And the question lingers. How will she respond when she finally confronts him? What will the consequences be for both of them? And for the secrets waiting to be uncovered inside the palace walls? What comes next will change everything, and no one saw it coming. The palace at night is not just silent, it is vigilant. Guards patrol its halls and courtyards with a precision born of decades of training, discipline, and instinct. Every step they take, every glance they cast, is calculated to detect anomalies, to ensure that nothing, or no one, moves through the corridors unnoticed. And tonight, one of those guards is about to notice something unusual. Prince Harry had so far moved through the palace with a combination of stealth, memory, and calculated timing. He had navigated corridors, avoided surveillance, and even skirted near certain staff who might recognize him. But the palace is not a forgiving environment. One small misstep, one hesitation, or one shadow out of place, and the balance of secrecy could crumble instantly. That misstep was about to happen. Guards, unlike walls or shadows, are unpredictable. Their training makes them alert to subtle deviations. A footstep that is too quiet, a door that should be closed left slightly ajar, the faint sound of movement where there should be none. Tonight, one guard, a veteran who has spent years memorizing every routine, every patrol route, noticed something that did not belong. It was a shadow at the edge of his vision, a movement that seemed too deliberate, too cautious, too human. He paused, listening intently. The palace at night has a rhythm, a pulse, and anything outside of it immediately draws attention. The guard's instincts, honed over years of observing royals, staff, and visitors, told him that this was no ordinary disturbance. Something, or someone, was in the palace who should not be there. He did not yet know who it was, but his intuition screamed caution. Meanwhile, Harry continued deeper into the palace corridors, unaware that he was being observed. He had relied on memory, careful planning, and a sense of confidence born from familiarity. But confidence can be dangerous in the palace, especially when it meets the unerring instincts of a trained professional. The guard moved subtly, repositioning himself to maintain a line of sight without revealing that he had noticed anything. The game had begun. Suspicion is a powerful force. It sharpens the senses, accelerates heartbeat, and forces decisions that can change the course of events in seconds. The guard's suspicion was now a lens through which every detail in the corridor was magnified. A shadow that lingered too long, a hand brushing against a railing in an unfamiliar way, the faint shuffle of shoes against polished marble. Every anomaly was a potential threat, and in his mind, the palace itself seemed to lean in, watching, waiting for the next move. Harry, still unaware, paused near a familiar doorway. He had come to a critical decision point. Move left toward the private chambers, or right toward a lesser-used hallway rumored to contain hidden archives. Both paths carried risk. Both paths carried potential revelation. But Harry's instincts guided him. Curiosity, necessity, and perhaps a subconscious need to confront his past propelled him forward. And in doing so, he unknowingly stepped closer to the watchful eyes of the guard. The guard, sensing that the anomaly was about to take a decisive action, adjusted his stance. Years of training kicked in. He had been instructed to act only if necessary, to avoid unnecessary confrontation, but he also knew that security breaches could escalate in moments. Every second counted. He watched as the figure, moving cautiously yet purposefully, approached a corridor junction. Every muscle in his body was poised for observation, assessment, and if needed, intervention. Inside, the palace itself seemed to respond to the tension. Shadows stretched, corridors appeared longer, and every creak of wood or whisper of air seemed magnified. The interplay between human action and the environment created a theater of suspense, where one misstep could have far-reaching consequences. Harry's presence, so meticulously calculated to be unnoticed, now collided with the guard's acute perception. And then came a moment that changed everything. Harry's footstep, light but deliberate, fell slightly differently than expected, a subtle shift in rhythm that caught the guard's attention. A trained observer, even from a distance, notices such details. The guard's suspicion sharpened into certainty. There was someone in the palace who should not be there. His mind raced through possibilities: a trespasser, a staff member breaking protocol, or a member of the royal family himself. Harry paused at the same time, sensing, though not fully understanding, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The silence was broken by a faint echo, the unmistakable presence of a watchful figure nearby. He had never felt truly hunted in the palace before, but now, every step he had taken was under scrutiny. Every calculated movement suddenly carried risk. The game had escalated from a clandestine exploration to a high-stakes encounter. The guard began to move subtly, his approach deliberate, careful, designed to maintain observation without alerting the intruder. Harry, unaware of the specifics, felt a tension that was almost palpable. Every sense heightened. The faint metallic scent of polished railings, the distant hum of air circulation, the subtle vibrations of footsteps echoing in long corridors. The palace was alive, and so was its guardian. Suspicion in this context is more than mere observation. It is a force that shapes behavior, decisions, and outcomes. The guard's intuition told him that the intruder had purpose, knowledge, and perhaps even audacity. Every step Harry took was scrutinized, analyzed, and catalogued in the guard's mind. And yet, the human element introduced uncertainty. Guards can misinterpret shadows, jump at innocuous sounds, or assume worst-case scenarios. One mistake could turn a simple observation into a confrontation, and one confrontation could spiral into public scandal. Harry, sensing something, paused again. He felt a presence, an unseen scrutiny, yet he could not pinpoint it. The palace had always been familiar, but tonight it was a labyrinth of tension, and the shadows seemed to shift with intention. His instincts, honed through years of public life, told him that caution was necessary. But how to proceed without knowing the threat was the challenge. And then, the subtle sound of a footstep behind a distant corner, a shadow shifting, almost imperceptibly, made him freeze. His heart raced, palms slightly damp. He knew instinctively that he was being watched, that the careful equilibrium of secrecy had been disturbed. The guard was nearby, calculating, assessing, ready to act if necessary. The palace corridors, silent moments before, now seemed to hum with tension, as if aware that the first collision of suspicion and stealth was imminent. Harry considered retreat, but curiosity and necessity pushed him forward. He had come too far to turn back. The archives, the hidden chambers, the possibility of discovering something long kept from him, all outweighed the immediate risk. And yet, every step was a negotiation with danger, every choice a gamble. The guard's presence was a reminder that the palace was not a passive environment. It had sentinels, and those sentinels could change everything in an instant. As he moved, the guard's suspicion grew into active assessment. Patterns, behaviors, and environmental cues were all weighed in the mind of the observer. Harry's movements were deliberate, cautious, but human, every nuance noted. The guard's eyes followed him, calculating risk, preparing for potential intervention, yet holding back, waiting for certainty. Suspicion had become engagement, and the tension between stealth and observation reached its peak. And then came the first real test, a corridor junction, perfectly lit by a chandelier, where shadows collided and lines of sight crossed. Harry stepped into the light, and the guard's intuition crystallized into recognition. There he was, the figure moving deliberately, yet trying to blend with the palace's rhythm. It was not a staff member, not a visitor, it was Harry. The realization hit the guard like a jolt, a member of the royal family, out of place, unannounced, and potentially compromising security. The next moment would define the rest of the night. A step forward, a pause, a subtle gesture. Each carried the weight of consequence. Harry had unknowingly triggered the guard's highest level of suspicion, and now every move would be scrutinized, every decision magnified. The palace, silent and majestic, had become a stage for a delicate, tense confrontation between secrecy and authority, between personal mission and institutional vigilance. And then, just as Harry adjusted his path, ready to move toward a safer corridor, the guard made a subtle shift, positioning himself to observe without revealing full awareness. It was a silent standoff, a dance of instincts, experience, and anticipation. Neither knew what the other would do next, yet both understood that the next moments could escalate into exposure, confrontation, or even scandal. The chapter ends here, on the precipice of collision. Harry, moving cautiously through the palace corridors, and the guard, suspicion sharpened to certainty, poised to act if needed. The tension is unbearable, the stakes immense, and what comes next could change everything. And no one saw it coming. Few places in the palace are as mysterious as the hidden chambers tucked away behind centuries-old walls. Some are secret passageways built for privacy, others archives that contain documents and correspondence the public has never seen. And then there are rooms that are whispered about but rarely acknowledged, a place so secret that even some staff members do not know of its existence. Tonight, Harry was about to stumble upon one of these rooms, and what he found inside would shift the tension from uncertainty to something far more electrifying. Harry had been moving cautiously through the corridors, guided by memory, intuition, and the subtle clues that hinted at secrets long kept. Every shadow seemed to have a story, every corridor a potential trap. He paused before a seemingly ordinary wall, its surface polished and unremarkable. But he remembered a childhood game of exploration, a passing comment from a staff member, a glimpse of something that did not belong. There was a faint seam, almost imperceptible, that suggested this was not just a wall. He pressed lightly against it. Nothing happened at first. Then, with a subtle shift, a panel gave way to reveal a narrow doorway, shrouded in darkness. Harry's pulse quickened. The hidden room. It was real. Every instinct told him to proceed with caution. The palace had its secrets for a reason. Some were dangerous, some sacred, and some simply too sensitive for prying eyes. Yet the allure of discovery, of understanding, was irresistible. The air that escaped the hidden room smelled faintly of aged wood, paper, and something else, something that whispered of decades of secrecy. Harry stepped inside, his footsteps careful, aware that any sound could alert the guard who was still somewhere in the palace, or worse, expose him to unintended witnesses. The room itself was small, but filled with the weight of history. Shelves lined with books, cabinets with locked drawers, and stacks of carefully stored papers suggested the room had been used to preserve knowledge, correspondence, and perhaps even private confidences of past royals. As Harry moved through the room, his eyes caught something unusual, a desk, slightly worn, with a single drawer slightly ajar. It seemed almost too inviting, as if someone had left it in anticipation of discovery. Heart racing, he approached it. Inside, he found letters, documents, and photographs, some old, some surprisingly recent. The handwriting varied, the ink faded, yet the message was clear. This was a record of decisions, alliances, and secrets that had been carefully hidden from the public eye. Each document he touched felt heavy, not with age, but with consequence. Among the papers, one item caught his eye, a sealed envelope, heavier than normal, with a wax seal he recognized instantly. It bore the symbol of the palace itself. Formal, unmistakable, official. Harry's hand trembled slightly as he broke the seal. The contents were brief, cryptic, but loaded with implication. The note suggested that someone within the palace had anticipated his movements, had tracked his intentions, and had left guidance, or perhaps a warning. The implications were staggering. Someone knew he was coming, and had prepared for it. Harry's mind raced. Who could it be? A loyal staff member? A family confidant? Or someone else, whose motives were entirely unknown? The very existence of the hidden room suggested a level of secrecy that went beyond normal palace operations. Whoever had curated these documents had intimate knowledge of both the physical layout and the emotional terrain. And now, Harry was inside, holding evidence that could alter the course of his mission, and perhaps his life. He heard a faint sound, a creak, a whisper, almost imperceptible. but it was enough to remind him that he was not alone. The guard's suspicion, combined with Meghan's fury, created a tension that hung like a storm cloud over the palace. Every moment was a potential pivot point. One misstep, one unexpected sound, one glance in the wrong direction could turn discovery into disaster. The documents themselves were revelatory. Some contained correspondence between family members, sensitive discussions about succession, and references to decisions made behind closed doors. Others contained personal notes, messages of encouragement, reprimand, or subtle warning, directed at individuals who had long left the palace, yet whose influence remained. Harry realized that the room was more than a repository of history. It was a living archive, a map of influence, power, and hidden dynamics that shaped the royal household. And then he found something unexpected, a photograph, recent, that included someone he did not anticipate seeing. It suggested that someone close to Meghan and Harry had been inside the palace recently. The revelation was immediate and unsettling. Why had this person been there? What had they done? And how did it connect to Harry's current mission? The implications were immediate. He was not just uncovering history. He was uncovering a web of secrets that were active, deliberate, and potentially explosive. Harry felt a surge of adrenaline. The hidden room had transformed from a quiet archive into a crucible of revelation. Every document, every photograph, every note was a thread in a tapestry of intrigue, waiting for him to pull. The consequences of discovery were immense. This was no longer a matter of personal curiosity. It was a matter of navigating secrets, strategy, and potential confrontation. He paused to consider the risks. One wrong move could expose him to the guard, who was undoubtedly still patrolling the palace corridors. One misread document could misinform him, leading to choices that might escalate conflict rather than resolve it. And of course, Meghan's awareness of his presence added a layer of emotional peril that could not be quantified. The hidden room was a crucible in which both the physical and emotional stakes of his mission were concentrated. And yet, he pressed on. Harry could not resist the pull of discovery. Every new piece of information offered clarity, and every revelation carried with it the potential for danger. He felt like an explorer navigating a labyrinth of history, secrecy, and personal consequence. The hidden room was a world apart, yet intimately connected to everything outside its walls. The documents in his hands were more than paper. They were keys, each capable of unlocking new understanding or sparking conflict. Then came the most unnerving discovery. Tucked beneath the stack of papers was a small, folded note, almost invisible, written in a hand he recognized instantly. The message was brief, yet its tone was unmistakable, a warning, a reminder, and perhaps a challenge. Someone knew Harry would come. Someone knew what he sought, and they had anticipated every step, every decision, every move. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. The hidden room was no longer a refuge. It was a stage on which the next act of the evening would unfold. Harry's pulse quickened. He understood that the room, the documents, and the hidden observer were all connected. The palace was no longer merely a backdrop. It was an active participant in the drama. Every corridor he had traversed, every shadow he had passed, had been part of a story unfolding in real time. And now, in the hidden room, he held evidence that could tip the balance of power, reveal secrets, and provoke reactions that were entirely unpredictable. The chapter ends on a cliffhanger. Harry, surrounded by documents, photographs, and cryptic messages in the hidden room, realizes that his mission has escalated beyond expectation. Someone within the palace has anticipated his every move, and the next step, the next revelation, could change everything, and no one saw it coming. In a palace as sprawling and secretive as this one, allies are rare, and trust is even rarer. Harry had come expecting shadows, whispers, and tension, but he was about to discover that not all forces in the palace were aligned against him. Sometimes, the most unexpected individuals can tip the balance of power in moments when danger is at its peak. Tonight, Harry would meet such a force, an ally he never anticipated, someone who could change the trajectory of his secret mission entirely. Harry was still processing the revelations of the hidden room. Documents, photographs, and cryptic notes filled his hands, each piece heavier than the last. He was aware that he was being watched, that the guard's suspicion could escalate at any moment, and that Meghan's fury was an emotional storm waiting to collide with his carefully laid plans. Yet amidst this whirlwind, there was a subtle sense that he was not entirely alone. Something in the palace, something human, something deliberate, was nudging events in a direction he had not foreseen. The first hint came from a quiet presence behind a partially closed door. Harry froze, instincts sharpening. Whoever, or whatever, was there could expose him instantly. Yet there was a subtlety in the movement, a calm, measured energy that suggested not aggression but observation. Harry's heart raced, but his curiosity outweighed caution. He moved closer, careful not to make noise, and peered into the shadows. There, standing almost imperceptibly, was a figure he recognized. Not a guard, not a staff member, but someone who had been part of the palace ecosystem for decades. This person's loyalty had always been somewhat ambiguous, their allegiances carefully measured between family, duty, and personal conscience. And yet, now, in this quiet, fraught moment, it became clear that this individual was on his side, or at least intrigued enough to intervene. "Harry," a low voice whispered, careful not to carry through the corridors. It was familiar, steady, yet tinged with urgency. "You shouldn't be here alone." The relief was immediate, but so was the caution. Allies in the palace are a double-edged sword, helpful in intent, unpredictable in execution. Harry kept his voice quiet, measured. "I know, but I had to come. There's something here I need to understand." The ally nodded subtly, their eyes flicking to the hidden documents in Harry's hands. "I've seen you moving through these halls before, and I know your intentions. But you're not just trespassing into history. You're stepping into active territory. Secrets that are meant to stay buried. Decisions that have real consequences. You need guidance, Harry, or this night could spiral out of control." The realization hit him like a jolt. This person had intimate knowledge of the palace, its patterns, and the unspoken rules that governed it. They had observed his movements, understood his goals, and were offering to help him navigate the minefield he had entered. The hidden room, the guard's suspicion, Meghan's fury, all of it was suddenly layered with the possibility of support. But support in this environment comes with conditions, and Harry was aware that trust had to be earned and given cautiously. Together, they began to move through the palace corridors, quietly, efficiently, each step calculated to avoid the guard who remained a silent, watchful threat. The allies shared subtle guidance, which corridors were patrolled, which rooms were safe to explore, and which doors were better left untouched. Every piece of information sharpened Harry's awareness and reduced the margin of error that had previously defined his mission. But the presence of the ally also heightened tension. Every shadow, every faint sound, now carried multiple interpretations. Was the guard still pursuing? Could Meghan's awareness manifest through indirect channels? And how much of the palace's hidden intelligence was being monitored by others unknown? Harry realized that even with an ally, the game had become more complex, layered with risk and possibility. The ally, moving silently beside him, shared stories in hushed tones. "The palace is full of secrets that never reach the surface," they whispered. "Some are benign, some dangerous, and some could change everything if revealed at the wrong moment. You're in a unique position tonight, but you must proceed carefully. Every step has repercussions beyond what you imagine." Harry absorbed every word, understanding that the ally was not just offering physical guidance, but insight into the emotional and political landscape of the palace. Knowledge is power, and in this case, it was also survival. The mission was no longer simply about discovery. It was about navigating a complex web of history, loyalty, and human behavior. And then came the most startling revelation. The ally hinted at a connection between Meghan's growing awareness and the guard's heightened suspicion. "You're not just dealing with the physical palace," they said. "You're dealing with a network of observation and influence. Someone knows more than you think. Someone has anticipated your movements. And if you're not careful, everything could unravel, quickly and publicly." The gravity of the statement was immediate. Harry realized that the mission had escalated beyond secrecy, curiosity, or nostalgia. The hidden room, the documents, the guard, and Meghan's fury were all threads in a tapestry he could not fully control. But the Allies' presence provided a lifeline, a chance to navigate these complexities with greater clarity and perhaps avoid catastrophic consequences. Together, they moved toward a section of the palace that had previously been obscured from Harry's memory. The ally explained its significance: a series of rooms and corridors that were rarely used, holding documents and artifacts that even some senior staff had limited access to. This section of the palace was not just physical space. It was a repository of influence, knowledge, and history. And tonight, it would play a pivotal role in Harry's journey. Every step was measured, yet the suspense was relentless. The guard remained an unseen threat. The possibility of Meghan's intervention loomed across the ocean, and the documents in Harry's hands suggested revelations that could provoke a range of reactions from anger to scandal. The Allies' guidance was precise, but no advice could eliminate the unpredictability of human behavior or the inherent danger of uncovering secrets in real time. And then, a sudden noise, a creak, a whisper, something almost imperceptible, made them freeze. The palace had a way of amplifying the smallest sounds, turning them into potential threats. The Allies signaled Harry to move slowly, pressing close to the shadows. The tension was unbearable. Every heartbeat, every breath, every step carried risk. The game was no longer about discovery alone. It was about survival, strategy, and emotional navigation. As they reached the threshold of a previously unknown chamber, the ally paused. "This is it," they whispered. "Whatever you find here will change your understanding of everything. The palace, your family, even your own choices. But be careful. Once you step inside, there's no turning back." Harry's pulse quickened. He understood the weight of the moment. The hidden room had revealed secrets, but this chamber promised revelation. The palace, once a passive backdrop, was now an active participant in a story that could alter the trajectory of his life, his relationships, and the decisions he had made for the past decade. And just as he took a step forward toward the chamber, the faintest sound, a shuffle, a whisper, the sense of being watched, reminded him that danger was still present. The guard, Meghan's fury, and unknown observers remained variables in a game that had grown exponentially more complex. The Allies' presence was a lifeline, but it could not eliminate the tension, the unpredictability, or the potential for confrontation. The chapter ends on a cliffhanger. Harry, guided by the unexpected ally, stands at the threshold of a chamber that promises revelation beyond imagination. The hidden room has led to this moment. The guard's suspicion is still active, and Meghan's fury looms as a distant yet palpable threat. What awaits inside could redefine everything, and no one saw it coming. The chamber before Harry was unlike any room he had encountered in the palace. Its entrance, hidden behind layers of walls and history, suggested that it had been intentionally obscured for a reason. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood, leather-bound books, and something less tangible, a hint of secrecy, of whispers long kept from prying eyes. It was a space that demanded reverence, caution, and keen attention, for every artifact, every document, every subtle detail could carry consequences far beyond what Harry had anticipated. As he stepped inside, guided by the ally whose presence was both reassuring and enigmatic, the chamber revealed itself in full. Shelves lined the walls, filled with meticulously preserved records, letters, diaries, correspondence between royals and advisors, and even personal notes never intended for public scrutiny. Each shelf seemed to whisper stories of the past, long-buried rivalries, clandestine alliances, and decisions whose ripples had shaped the present in ways the world could scarcely imagine. Harry moved cautiously, aware that even the smallest disturbance could be noticed. The palace had a rhythm at night, a pulse of silence, movement, and observation, and any deviation could attract the attention of the watchful guard somewhere nearby. Yet the allure of discovery was irresistible. Each document he examined seemed to offer a piece of a puzzle, fragments of truth that could illuminate, complicate, or even upend what he thought he knew about the palace and his family. The ally stayed close, moving silently, occasionally pointing out subtle cues in the room that might otherwise go unnoticed. "This section," they whispered, "contains correspondence that was never meant to be read by anyone outside the inner circle." These letters reveal intentions, concerns, and even conflicts that shape decisions at the highest levels. Handle them carefully. Harry nodded, absorbing both the warning and the thrill. The room was not just an archive. It was a map of human emotion, power dynamics, and historical consequence. He began to sift through letters with care, scanning handwriting, noticing patterns, deciphering nuances. One note suggested a long-standing tension between two senior family members over succession issues. Another letter hinted at a secret agreement that had quietly influenced events for decades. Every revelation carried weight, suggesting that the palace's public image was only a fraction of its true story. But the chamber was not merely about the past. It had direct implications for Harry's current situation. Some documents referenced individuals still alive, including Meghan and him. He discovered references to decisions about privacy, movements, and interactions that had been orchestrated without his knowledge. The realization was immediate. The palace had been monitoring, influencing, and even anticipating actions long before he had stepped inside. Every step he had taken tonight had been part of a larger, unseen network of observation and influence. And then, tucked in a corner of the chamber, Harry found something that made his pulse quicken, a folder marked with a symbol he recognized instantly, one that tied directly to Meghan. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing documents, photographs, and letters that suggested she had been more aware of palace activities than he had realized. There were hints that she knew, or at least suspected, some of his movements, and had been strategically positioning herself in response. The implications were staggering. Her fury was not just emotional but informed, deliberate, and potentially devastating if not navigated with care. The ally observed quietly, their presence both stabilizing and cautious. These documents, they whispered, reveal a network of influence that is both protective and constraining. You must decide carefully which revelations to act on and which to simply understand. Not everything is meant to be confronted head-on.